Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Dungeon Mastery. It has been a little while between these different sessions. I want to welcome back into the saddle DM Robin. Welcome, mate. It's been a while.
No, it has been. No, it's good to be back and talking some DM mastery.
Absolutely. Look, we are the Raging Rolls. We're a bunch of nerdy-ass Australians who occasionally get together about once a week and play some D&D, try our stupid voices and have a lot of fun. And there's a lot of raucous jokes thrown in there as well. We stream on Twitch every Thursday night with the VOD available pretty much straight after that. And shorter form of our broadcast and then cut up for your convenience and thrown into our YouTube about a week after. If you're enjoying this, why not follow us along on Twitch, YouTube, and wherever you can find us, pretty much everywhere, and even subscribe to show your support for the stream. You can find us on all the different places. You can find us on Twitch, where you're looking at us probably right now, YouTube, if you're looking at us a little bit later, Patreon, Instagram, Facebook, you name it, we are there. Come and say hello, and I'll even throw our Discord link in our Twitch chat right now. Today on Dungeon Mastery, I'm excited to have DM Robin back because it's been a year of running Rime the Frostmaiden. Robin, can you believe it?
It's honestly amazing. I've been sort of watching as it's become more and more complex and the storyline has sort of evolved. I've just sort of observed from the sidelines, but
do you know what I've found over that year? I went into this venture very much wanting everyone to have a backstory I could try and bring into the main story. Well, shit, now there's so many tangled webs that have been connected together, and I'm trying to just, how does this relate to, how do I connect this back to what's actually in the campaign description or campaign like content versus what their stories are doing, and then they go on a fucking tangent, and it's hectic, man. So I want to kind of start there today, trying to connect existing backstories into a predefined campaign.
That one's honestly, I think, one of the biggest challenges of running pre-written campaigns.
100%.
Yeah.
I thought coming into this, running pre-written, it's like, okay, it's a bit more on rails. They do this is the options, cool. No,
I always found that the frustration, because it's like it makes a lot of things easier for you as a dungeon master to run those pre-written ones, because it gives you all the content and you know that you can just read what's ahead of you and you'll be fine. But then you also want to, as a DM, you want your players to feel involved and feel like they are playing, to their fantasy. And so you often are very willing to concede to bring in more fantasy elements that they want to play around with. And as a result, you're constantly in competition with the source material that you've kind of committed yourself to running. And it's like, and often, and I think we've seen it in our cases a few times, where the side content becomes just like so much more fun because it's related to the things they actually care about than what's going on in the tangential storyline. It's like, oh, I guess we'll go see the unicorn today because we know we have to, but like we're just as much having fun just fighting around in the forest. It's just kind of one of those little things.
So I hope if any of my players, the Raging Rolls, are watching this, you can now stick around but tune out, stick your fingers in your ears, because I want to get pretty open with you, Robin, and what's going on in this campaign. So potential spoilers or reveals ahead. What I'm trying to do with this whole campaign, this whole experience, is to take backstories, and yes, there's an opportunity, very easy opportunities to create these little tangential side quests. But after running this for a year, let's be honest, this campaign has 7 chapters. We've been through chapter 1, right? So there's a lot, right? So I'm kind of trying, my whole objective is to bring the different backstories and their personal quests in line with what the main story quest is.
Yeah.
And above and beyond that, connect together multiple different backstories into one thing. Right? So the idea is they sort of uncover a few things independently, but lo and behold, they'll kind of connect back together.
Ambitious, but I like it.
I mean, otherwise I've got 7 different backstories to potentially resolve.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, which is a lot. If I can narrow that down to like 2 or 3, I'm more comfortable with that because there's also a lot of the main content to try and resolve as well. I mean, I refer back to whatever experience I've had in the past running this kind of stuff, but trying to weave in backstory to main campaign. Would you, in your experience, have you normally trying to take backstories into their own tangent, or try to weave them into whatever you thought was going to be the main story?
I think it's so important, I think, to keep momentum in a campaign. I think it's one of the hardest things as a DM to do, is to kind of keep the ball rolling forward the whole time and make it feel like every session somebody's making progress. And it's like, I think you have to prioritize that sense of group progress, I think, above everything else. At least that's sort of the way I look at it. Like, too much time spent deviating too far, some players can get a bit antsy. It's like, well, I'm keen to get back on the road. Like, there's my thing to kind of sort out. But I think there's always going to be players that are more interested in their backstory and exploring it than others as well. So I try and quickly evaluate. There's people that will happily be grateful if we can spend, half a session just doing a flashback to something and how it evolved past, the ending of the main campaign, right? Like, if that's all that they need to feel that, like, fulfillment and, like, to just play out what would be, like, that's great. Like, we could happily do something like that, but it doesn't now need to deviate from the whole main plot. But then for the other people, I definitely try to, I think, use them as good catalysts for the main story beats. Like, if I can take one person's backstory and use it as, like, a compelling reason for this next arc, like, that's something that I try and lean into. Like, if I can complete their backstory in a chapter, and then sort of they're on board for the rest of the journey, but we've kind of already closed off a lot of their main questions. Just sort of getting us to where your book quest or your pre-written quest might be trying to take you. So, like, how do we, instead of the journey that the book proposes, we now replace that journey with one that kind of still leads us there, but passes through this character's backstory instead.
I hear you 100%. And I feel like that's what I'm trying to do with a lot of these different things. I know there's places I want them to end up, or scenarios where I want them to get to. It's like, what's the path to get there, right? Because this whole thing is very sandboxy. It's like, here's a shit ton of quests. Go for your life. Just experience the world.
Yeah.
Which is great for trying to, like, plant backstory elements. But at the same time, they know there's this, in this case, the Rime of the Frostmaiden, this big thing that's the nemesis of the region, right?
The looming threat.
The looming threat, that's right. It's like, well, we can go and do these different side quests, but how's that impacting this looming threat? And I'm pulling a few levers here and there to try and see if I can make that happen. Like, for example, at the end of season 1, I'm calling them seasons now because chapters doesn't sound as cool. We brought together some background people from 3 of the 7 different characters.
Nice.
Basically, they're all shacking up with the same person without realizing it. And now this one person is now in league with the looming threat.
Nice.
Right. So now the reason that I was trying to do that was to give them purpose, personal purpose, because I think that's what's really critical in all this, having personal purpose for their character to progress, other than just, I want to be a good guy and help out the region.
Because that's honestly, like, who's ever risked their life for that as a motive, Like...
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know if you've read it or not, but I recently picked up this the Game Master's Handbook of Proactive Role-Playing.
I saw a video on it, and I'm actually super excited to read it, but I haven't got a chance.
It's really, really good. But it's really, really good to know before you start a campaign.
Yes. it felt like it needed people to design their characters in line with some of the
100%.
philosophies in there, right?
100%. I'm like now trying to retroactively
Yep.
get the players to sort of tell me, what are your goals? What are you trying to achieve, rather than me trying to figure it out. And that should come into play. And I think it is. It's helping.
Nice.
But that's really cool.
It feels like a bit more of an intuitive way to run a session to me as well. Like it's much more about, you know, like tell me where it's heading and I'll prepare the road more than anything else, right?
Which, yes, 100%. I think this kind of thing is freaking amazing for running homebrew stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can just flex and flip and pivot.
Which is my preference usually, right? Like,
Your preference.
I can flex so well in these kind of worlds.
Trying to bring that shit into a pre-written campaign, it's like, why do they care?
I in the last one, for example, I created a scene where the god was, you know, actually intervening into the politics of the witch's domain. And it was like quite a convoluted sort of element to bring in, with the two different planes sort of interacting with each other. And I was like, hope that doesn't ever bite me in the butt and like cause any long-term ramifications for the storyline.
So
but
true.
Like it would work out, because like the one thing I love about D&D is like I get sometimes this grandiosity about it, and I come up with a perfect storyline and I present it to the players, and it's like, oh, actually, didn't you say this that one time that the god was here, and therefore like they would be able to come into this realm, so they'd be actively fucking things up for us right now instead of this calm. And I'd be like, well, no, you're absolutely correct. Like, consistency of the world matters. Like, let's have it. And it just, that's now the reality, right? Like, I think there's some magic about that we have this game system that can be so reactive.
Let me share a situation that I'm facing at the moment. And no, before I do that, I want to get your advice on something here. Railroading.
Yes.
Yeah. Obviously, this game is very open-ended. Like you said, you want to let characters and players do what they want to do. I had a situation towards the end of Season 1 where they wanted to go... They had some suspicions about this local town speaker or town mayor, more or less, and they wanted to go and ask around about him. They wanted to go to the tavern and ask around. I'm like, fuck, there's nothing here. Like, there is nothing going on here. But they were like, no, there's something. And, you know, in reflection, after that session with some of the other players and whatnot, and my own time, it was a dull session. Like, it was one of those sessions you go like, shit, to your point earlier, nothing fucking progressed. There's just no movement. So the question I have is, how do you, like, what's your advice or what's your experience been when players start asking questions where you know there is nothing there? And you try your best to try and say, yeah, look, you should go and do this thing over here, but when do you put up a wall and say, whoop, you've reached the edge of the game?
Yeah, it's a really tough one. I think I try a lot of different things. Sometimes you have to be a lot more direct than others. Like most of the time, it's pretty easy to show them where the shiny, like the bouncing ball is going. But like there are times when, like, and it's a credit to your world, right? Like they really are just so aware that any of this could be where the next hook is. And it's like, it all feels so tangible. So like being able to go and explore it is super exciting. I guess like I try and always think about a way, and this is obviously very onerous on the DM, but like, how can I bring a hook in this space and like give them something to find that helps kind of take them back on the right path? Like, is there something that we can use to hook them back? Is this actually where the person is? Sometimes is pretty convenient. It's like, oh wow, you guys figured it out. It is been bumfuck nowhere after talking to several people that I didn't ever have to think about before. You did it. And then it's like, but like for the players, it's still that sense of like I did it. Like I've gone through the clues and I found my way here. And I think like again we can bend the reality of our world. It's like that is now the canon.
So one of the things we were talking about post that session is how to like steer people back, and I could see at one point through that game that they're asking questions which I know have no path in them that I could knew about on the spot. And I know we can improvise, but sometimes my ability to like connect those tethers together on the fly isn't quite there. And one of the
high insight characters.
Well, this is what we were talking about,
Yeah.
right? It's like when someone is potentially asking questions or pursuing a line of questioning where you're like, nothing here, like ask for an insight check. And basically anything other than a 0, you've determined, hey, there is nothing here, move on.
That is the golden solution is like a good insight check, or any, like you can spin half of the checks to kind of be a sanity check of if we're going in the right direction or not, right? It's like, is this door gonna budge for us? It's like, I don't know, make a strength check. It's like, you got an 18, it did not even flinch. Like, okay, I hear you loud and clear.
Yeah.
But then if they then decide to pull out dynamite and blow the thing up, I reward that stupidity, because why the fuck not? Like, that's the best thing that's happened all night.
That's true. But how do you, like, okay, let's pursue that kind of thing for a second then. I take a door, it doesn't want to open, doesn't budge, but I'm going to blow it up. Reward that stupidity. How? Is that the door to the next part of the quest? Or is that like, oh shit, you find a bunch of treasure?
I think we've done both in the way I've run games. Like sometimes it was the next spot. Other times it ended up being a 6-session deviation from the story because we went into a dungeon that I made up because it was fun. Like it is what it needs to be.
Right. Fair enough. Cool. Do you have any other examples? And I'm putting you on the spot here where you've had to try and railroad someone, or you've just let them roll?
I think like the interesting thing about running Waterdeep was the political nature of it, and trying to make some of that come to light, and trying to build intrigue, and trying to make the players care about that intrigue. That was tough. Like it was tough to sell, like from my side. Like I kept feeling like I wasn't doing it the justice that I want to do, and there's a lot of imposter syndrome too in that. Like again, the player experience is obviously different. But like I really wanted it to feel like there was a web of people that were sort of, you know, on the peripheries of the political landscape. And that was hard to like kind of get people to follow a thread properly and keep them aligned to that thread. And there was a lot in that city, and so there was constant distraction. And because there was so many threads, it ended up getting kind of a little convoluted, and I think it was like hard to know which thread was the one that was going to get us like direct progress. And like part of what was hard about running that was like the mystery was some of it. So it's like I had to kind of let you guys be good detectives sometimes and bad detectives sometimes, and kind of feel out like, are we going in the right direction? I think that was part of the puzzle. So often was like, I'm going to let you guys stumble a little bit here, and hopefully like you'll figure it out. But, you know, if not, I'll figure out a way, you know, if it's taking too long to try and pull you back.
I've got a question in the chat for you, Robin. What do you, from Inflatable Cat, another, what do you do if you think you've tried different ways to make your PCs care about your NPC, but they just become more and more suspicious of that same NPC instead? Great question, Kat.
I think like I've made a lot of NPCs that I thought were really cool that became memed on in sessions really hard. or like I thought they were cool, but they were disregarded, and nobody else kind of spent the time with them that I had like more to give for them, but it was like they didn't really resonate. And I think there's also always the other side of it, where the second you pay special attention to any character in your world, your players start distrusting them because you're also the creator of the bad guys in the game. I think, it's like, is this a friend or is this long-term enemy? Question mark. It's like you can't really trust any of those characters at face value. I think that's definitely a difficult one to navigate. I think like you can always build trust through action. A good NPC should have opportunity to prove that through like the things that they do. So can you show them in a good light, in a way that they might step up, or show some of that character that you think makes them a good candidate for a friend of the party, or whatever you want them to be. We have to just get creative in selling them to the party and getting them to trust them, and show that they're genuinely not meant to hurt them later on, if we can. And maybe they are, but that's for the players to decide.
So I've got a situation then, Robin, or I did have until we managed to resolve it, where from I think session 2, the party picked up an NPC and traveled, because the whole idea was that it was an escort mission. It took 25 sessions to complete the escort mission.
Quick and easy.
Yeah, quick and easy. But she was freaking useless. She was more or less a scholar who wasn't having a bar of any kind of conflict and was just trying to get the party. My idea of using her was to like railroad them, say, oh, we want to do this. But every time they went on a different tangent, I had to park her in some tavern or inn or something, and she just poof, disappeared out of the story. And they eventually picked up another NPC who was more confrontational. But one thing I continually stuffed up on doing with these NPCs is involving them. They were like, is this person still following us? I'm like, oh shit, yeah, they are. They're just like the silent shadows behind the whole thing. And even the one that was a bit more confrontational and a bit more like, could wield stuff in a fight, would just sit there and just not participate. How do you manage those kind of situations where you've now got NPCs who are like traveling with and becoming part of that experience, but not let them take over?
In that one case, I think like if it's possible to give their combat stats to one of the other players to kind of manage, it's like you're responsible for doing the combat for like this new party member while they're a part of the party. It's like you can kind of use their skills, right? It's like so that's one less thing for you as the DM to manage. And I tell you what, the player's never going to forget that they can attack their enemy with one more attack. Like it's an easy way to share the responsibility of that complexity.
Nice one.
I also think it's like if you've got a character that's like going to be with them that long, is it a case that they should be getting a little bit more involved? Like they've obviously now gotten a bit more connected to the party, hopefully. Like they don't want them to die either. They've been risking their life to try and save them. Maybe they would want to support them in some way during the travels. Like they're not useless, but for the sake of the story, like they're always barricading themselves in the back, like just being there to kind of support them and get ready to pull one of them back if they get injured or something like that. It's like they're kind of more an auxiliary role. But
I mean, this particular character, Tali, in my story was the scholar. There was, from the outset, loads of opportunity to use her to create a bit more exposition around different characters and get not under their skin, but get them to divulge a little bit, if not to other party members, and at least to viewers as to what the hell's going on. The challenge I faced was just forgetting she existed or was present in the moment, right?
I mean, I've been guilty of that so many times.
It
seems like when you've got so much else on, the players aren't focusing on the nameless NPC. It's easy for that to kind of just get like abstracted away.
100%.
But I do think like it's almost like you can do some things to give that sense of like character, and like it kind of is skipped away, and like when the players can reflect on, they're like, oh yeah, they were definitely there through the whole thing. And like we can do a lot in maybe in the way we introduce sessions. Maybe at the beginning of a session, they have more of a scripted part that you've actually put some time into thinking, like, what are they going to say today? Like, what's the stance they're going to take today to kind of like annoy the party, or like give them some way to be a memorable character and in the start. And then they can kind of like fade away. Like once they've annoyed the characters, like now we don't have to bring her up again. Like she's just gonna sulk in the background. You know, we can think to like, how can we introduce them this session to give them a bit of an identity, and then ignore them when the fighting happens.
I like that. Yeah. So at least they've been brought up, they've been discussed. Then we can park that and move on, and bring it back if we start the next one.
I'm reminded of like stand-up magic. You know, the idea of like a card trick or something where the guy is like pulling it off and it all looks so seamless, but it's like there's magic in it. It's like we know that he pulled off a trick, but in the moment you don't really care because you couldn't really figure it out. And it was your card, so it's like it's pretty incredible. I think it's like we forget that in the moment our players don't care about all those details. They really just want to know, is their character doing cool shit? Are their characters going to be alive? Can they do something badass? Is there loot? You know, it's like the priority of all those things. The NPCs and actions are probably quite low on that priority list.
Let's talk about two of the things you just mentioned there. Can I do cool shit? And is there loot? I wanted to ask you about a situation I had come up in just the last session where we'd all kind of agreed that it was going to have to be a short session because of logistics and just people, right? Real life. So I thought, cool. Rather than getting too bogged down in travel and RP type stuff, we'll just have a bit of a quick encounter and then we'll park it. So here's the situation. The characters are all woken at 4 or 4:30 in the morning to all this cacophony outside. There's fires going on. There's a band of gnolls sort of charging through the town, just causing havoc. Sure enough, the whole session went down in terms of it was combat. They took down the gnolls. Great. I thought, cool, encounter done. We'll park it there. They'll move on to the actual quest they've wanted to pursue. Why were there so many gnolls here? I was like, no.
Oh no, the open world has implications.
So my question is, there's so much in D&D about random encounters. Okay, how do you convey the message that this is a random encounter? The edge of the game world again. Like, how do we go? We've just had a fight. Cool, you won. Let's go over here.
Yeah, it's so tough, hey.
But hang on before you jump in, because there was like, I didn't want them to ask that question. They did. But as it turns out, in part of what could be coming up, there is a null thing, right? So it did tie in nicely, but now there's just more distractions. There's like now 7 or 8 different quest lines they could possibly pursue. So, Domini, with your wisdom.
I think we can probably I think there has to be consequences in D&D. And I think we as DMs can be very good at trying to just, you know, allow as much as we can to kind of give this idea of this rich world. I think it's also important to like give them a choice where the other option is not going to be available next time. And use that like timeliness of these options to like slowly start, you know, making it more of like, oh, we actually, if we don't go and see what's happening with the gnolls right now, like the next time we come here, like what's going to happen with these villages? It's like and it's like you have 2 options. Like if you don't go on the rest of this quest, like there's stuff that's going to start messing you up there. It's like you think that this is the best use of your time, but you kind of paint this picture that like there's complexity and real big problems that you're now letting fester over there. It's like almost giving them this impression that, and it's probably real, like that next time, if you don't go there now, it's going to get worse for you. And if you don't deal with these gnolls right now, it's going to get worse for the townspeople. And it's like, that's a fun consequence. And it's like, if they do choose to go to the gnolls, you have permission to just kick their absolute butts all the way to the rest of that campaign, right? It's like, now it's like we've got cool options, but we're grounded in like our characters are real and they have limited time and not everything's just going to wait forever.
Yeah.
And it's like, now's the choice.
It's really timely, pun intended, and interesting that you mentioned that kind of thing, right? For a few reasons. So obviously with this pre-written campaign, a lot of things are meant to wait until the quest is taken. Right? There's hasn't really got too much in there around the world progresses, but you've got to make that happen.
Yes.
And one thing that I wanted to do coming back, starting into season 2, having a bit of a break off, I wanted to give the characters a bit of a recap on what's happened and some news on what's happened in recent times based on those actions that have taken place.
Nice.
As an example, let's run through some of the towns I've been in this campaign. The town of Bremen, right, was run by a frail old guy who was basically senile. They killed him unintentionally. The next town they went to, Targos, was run by a sneaky Zentarum. They killed him. Right. The next town they went to, speaker there seems okay. They're suspicious of him. They heard of another town where another speaker is missing. And so, unintentionally, there's this whole thing popped up around, why are all these speakers disappearing? Why are they all fucktards? Like, they're all dead or disappearing. And as part of these news headlines of, town speaker died here, this guy died over here, who's running the show, I'm like, when I was writing that out, I'm like, it makes sense for there to be like a council of speakers to elect new leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Seems logical, right?
And this is the same thing as the Knolls, right? This was supposed to be tune out now, players. This was supposed to be creating the sense that the world is alive and progressing, whether they like it or not. Now it's a fucking quest, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now it's like, oh shit, there's this council of speakers happening. We better be there and find out what's going on. Now we're in homebrew territory, 100%, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just like, how do I... what I'm trying to grapple with is absolutely pursuing that threat. They want to pursue it. It's timely.
And it's a cool threat. Like,
it's a cool threat.
It's very compelling.
But then figuring out what the fuck I do with it. It'll come out. It'll be fine.
It will. And I think, your players are pretty transparent of, the types of things they enjoy. So it's like, they're going there. They'll hopefully find some more of that kind of content. Just make sure it lines up. And, at the end of the day, if the end of that resolves in the council becoming hopefully stable, if they don't destabilize it, it's like, cool. That's going to keep running even if we continue that quest again. It's like even though you've invented some new canon for this space, it will hopefully not have long-term ramifications towards the main story outcomes, right?
It might. I don't know.
It might.
Yes.
But and I guess that's kind of cool too. I've definitely run my fair share of campaigns that the big bad got inadvertently killed too quickly, too early because of something I allowed. I think obviously the Xanathar was a great example of that and just getting nuked. But I think there's opportunity in that to say because of what you guys did, this thing ended up dying so quickly that obviously it wasn't ever really that much of a threat, which means that in this timeline, a bigger threat has kind of filled the gap, right? It's it's a different threat that's filled that same opportunity. And so you sort of then can take the changes they've made and turn that into a different homebrew finale even. So it's you've taken the bones of the sort of written campaign, but you've turned it into something that pays off for the cool stuff they did outside of the written sort of bounds, and you give them an opportunity to finish it off in a way that makes sense again for all of the cool stuff they did that wasn't in the book.
It's funny. I chose a pre-written campaign to minimize the amount of effort that was going to be required, but it feels like it's more because what's supposed to happen throughout this whole thing, and now you got to tie all this other bullshit which is going on into that. right? Or like you done with Waterdeep and Witchlight and so on, just go off on a tangent and just pursue that, and it becomes homebrew.
And that was like obviously it had its own ups and downs, and I think I honestly use a lot of the rest of the book to help tie it back into cool pieces that the book had. I use it more of like this is a composable element that I can now weave in where it works. So it still saved me a bunch of time in creating like the sections where you'd be exploring a new town. I didn't have to really invent any of that dynamic or who was doing what with who when you guys walked in. All of that was pre-written. I could just kind of read it. But then, them being murdered by a giant swamp monster wasn't sort of part of the experience as written. But I'm glad we did it. It was cool. And it only happened because you guys freed a really dangerous creature into the world. And that had crazy consequences for that village of frogs,
I remember that. There is a question in the chat we should answer, because it is 100% true when it comes to all this kind of thing we're talking about. And it's like, how do you deal with the chaotic Finry style player? The player just wants to poke everything, like, what's the term? Like, just piss off or irritate the other players in their character. And to all the Finrys in the world, I mean no disrespect, but they are ever-present type characters. How do you manage? What's your experience in trying to manage those type of players and create space for other players to step in?
I think like I've tried to always, and this also goes back to the way I try and like run meetings and things at work, is make space for everybody first of all to have a moment where they can contribute. Some people will find contribution much easier than others. Other people find it, if they're not given the space, they literally will never take the mic. Like they're happy to just sit in the back. Like even, and the problem is like their point of view is cool, and like their character's point of view in the case of D&D adds richness to like the party. So it's important to try and draw that out however you can. I think the Finrys of the world are, for me, fantastic because they fill the game with things and like little tests of the boundaries of the world. It's like, oh no, this is also real. Oh, when this is also real. But I think that the other side of that is a good Finry player will also know when to let somebody else hold the microphone. I think it has to be both ways, right? And I think obviously Dan does a really good job of that, in the case of Raging Rolls, really kind of respecting, if somebody else is having a moment for their character, like giving them the limelight, letting them have their moment, and adding value to that by, adding some humor to it, I think is usually the way that plays out. And like, I think that's where there's a difference between a Finry style player that is disrespectful and not giving anybody else space, and those that still are the person that they want to be, but allow others to also enjoy the game that they're also playing.
It's an interesting balance, right? Like you said, there are those players who are happy to just, fling some spells and throw some shit, and those who want to be way more active in the world and, like you said, touch everything and test everything, and bringing the games that the players want and will want to enjoy is always an interesting balance.
I think that proactive role-playing book has like some really cool point of views on that. Like, the players are very clear about the stuff that they want to be pursuing. And if you start the game with like, hey, do you guys care about a political fantasy about, the monarchs and, shifts of power? No. Okay, well then I'm not going to give you a political campaign. Like that sounds like a great realignment of what we want.
100%. I think that book is such a good like source guide for running player-driven campaign. It's so good in describing that. The analogy that keeps coming to mind for me is like, if you're watching a movie, the protagonist does not want to get involved in anything until he's forced to get involved.
Yeah.
Until it becomes personal. And it's got to be the same kind of thing with this, right?
Yeah.
And I know we all try to make, I think a lot of us try to make these kind of games related personally to the character. I know I tried to do that early on. I think it was session 2 or 3 by planting some evidence on one of the characters that we killed that would lead on and on and on. And a quick tangent, but one of the things I was I guess somewhat expecting to happen post that was that piece of evidence would be discussed and cause that thread to be unraveled.
Right.
What did happen instead was that evidence was hidden and never discussed again. Because that's what the character would do, apparently. Like, because that character's like, I don't want my laundry out here right now. That's hidden.
I'm putting that away.
And that's happened a couple of times, actually. It's like where I've had evidence and secrets and clues pop up, but it's been that character who's gone, nope, no one's seen that right now, thanks.
And that never comes up again.
So I'm trying to find a way to say, like, how do I force certain kind of nuggets and like intriguing moments to crop up naturally without forcibly steering other characters to discover it.
I only say this because it's really been good inspiration to me, but have you seen the animated show Delicious in Dungeon?
It's on my Netflix thing a lot, but no, I haven't.
God, it's such a great example of like players who are in a dungeon, right? And we've all been in the D&D campaigns where it's like fight till you get to the end of the dungeon. It's going to be multiple levels. Like you're going to fight cool enemies on the way there. Like, yay. But this show's got me like feeling like emotional about these silly characters and feeling like really immersed in the lore of, you know, the dwarves in that world, just from the small window of this little dungeon. You don't get to see any of the rest of the world at all. You don't get to see any of the countries, the politics, any of the armor. All you're following is one party trying to navigate this dungeon. And the way it world builds, and like to your point, things get hidden from the other party members, but it's the way that it forces the character's hand and often to kind of, oops, like this is actually, I have to reveal this about myself because it's become super relevant to like the situation at hand. It's got a lot of good examples of doing that and how you can make it matter to everybody, even though it's just that one person's backstory.
Okay, worth a watch then. Worth a watch for a bit of research. Delicious in the Dungeon.
Really good fun, and obviously very heavily inspired by things like Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And where to next? Like, this campaign's got me thinking now that what's happened in our player chats recently has been a bit of an analysis of like all the different threads which are open. And here's the thing. So I know for a fact that the players, or who they're now calling themselves, the Fists of Bremen, really want to like jump on board with the main storyline, right?
Sure.
Yeah. It doesn't exist yet. That's the thing, right? There's for the first 2 chapters of this particular campaign, there's just the green quest icons instead of the golden quest icons.
Right.
And
it's just filler.
It's just filler. It's designed to get the characters to understand what the world is like and feel a need to save it. I've got to find a way. I'm trying to put kind of like quest guides or little clues. I want to put little clues of what's happening in the world that relates to the end goal in every one of these different things. Right? Have you ever had to experience, like, go through this kind of thing before, where you've got so many different like sandboxy type quests, but you need to like but plant little nuggets of information throughout that whole world that all relate back to this main thing? Even though
you always have to work backwards and try and like map it out, like as try and figure out the stages of like I'm almost imagining, a marketing journey where it's like, how do we do an engagement campaign? But it's like, how do you sprinkle a little bit to begin with and become like more and more heavy-handed as they sort of navigate? So it's like they can maybe miss the subtle things, but as they keep going, it's going to start hitting them over the head.
Yes.
But it's like in your case, you're trying to simultaneously have 6 to 8 things build to hit them over the head.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Hey, can any of those threads take each other out? Is there a way for them in the sort of politics of the world to kind of wipe each other?
possibly.
Like if they give their support in one area, does another area wipe out an option? You know, like
It's less political than that. Which is a whole other conversation we could have around factions and that kind of shit.
But if you've got a null problem, like a dragon can sort that for you if it's not like watched too carefully, you know?
Yeah.
Like there was a cool null experience here, and you can even see the golden tablet that you would have found, but it's actually just melted to the ground when the dragon came. Like you snooze, you lose.
There is a dragon. There is a dragon in this campaign.
Hey, I mean, I'm not trying to tell you how to run your campaign, but that seems like low hanging fruit.
No, I like that. I like that a lot actually, because right now I've left everything kind of like left to be explored. But you're right. Story goes, this dragon's floating around Icewind Dale. What else is it doing up there?
Why are you letting your players just snooze on that content? Like, are you so short on content that you need them to have all of that? It doesn't sound like that's your problem. It sounds like you've got too much content, not too little content.
Way too much content.
So yeah, prune some branches would be my first suggestion. And allow it to be thematic and allow it to matter in the world. But like, I think that's like a really fun and easy way to start navigating some of that. But then, you know, to your point, find the ones that you can through some creativity connect together. That's going to be your payoff, and like that's something that's going to be your, you know, reveal as the time goes.
What's been interesting is like as all new source materials coming out, like I've got my hands on the Book of Many Things and what is it, the Game Master's Book of Villains, Minions and their Tactics and
How
stuff
have
like
you
that.
find that? Because that's based on the new D&D rulings, isn't it?
Book of Many Things.
Yeah, or is that like still the 5e?
It's still 5e.
Right.
There's no next gen content out until September,
cool.
I think. So yeah, I like it. It creates a lot of options, and now I don't hand out inspiration points anymore. It's all inspiration cards, a bit like the Fate deck you had before.
That was I mean, look, very creative, but doing the same kind of thing, right?
But this is now like you get to pick 1 of 4 cards that are all like open, and you can see what they are, and they give you a one-time use kind of boon, which could be variable.
So it's 4 options, or how?
There's like a deck of 22 or something, and there's 4 available on the table at any given time.
Right. So you choose the one of the 4 that you have as an option, but there's 21 options available in the deck.
Exactly.
Nice.
So that's really cool. But with the other content that's come out, I'm like, I want to use it because it's so freaking cool. Like the Book of Villains is awesome.
Nice.
Right? And
how many villains is included? Like, I'm curious, like what kind of villains they've got in there for you to use.
Let's have a look. In this book, there are, I want to say about 30.
That's pretty good. Each of them with their own art and stuff.
Each of them with their own art, backstory, reasons for being a villain, stat blocks, minions. It's freaking incredible.
Oh, nice. It's almost like your little mini campaign arc. And
so this is one which I've been tempted to involve in this campaign.
Oh yeah.
But I want to focus on this little minion here as being part of the key to what I'm thinking.
Ooh, fun.
What I'm trying to weave together, just a little bit of a spoiler, is
that's amazing.
That magic, along with giant magic.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so that's cool. What is really cool about this thing, let's just have a quick chat about this, is it actually presents different realms and layers for all these giants. Right? So it all comes pre-done. And I feel like it makes sense when you're in the frozen north, which is a heavily giant country, or was once upon a time, for there to be fucking more giants than one little quest.
I mean, I don't even think you're wrong. Like, I think in my ideal fantasy world, absolutely, it should be strewn with giants.
And that's the thing, right? There's so much material here to just throw at players like almost constantly. It's like, when do you go like, holy shit, this is supposed to be a desolate wasteland type world, not like so much stuff, it's ridiculous. We've already had a look at things coming up from the Underdark. We know there's potentially giants and demons around this world as well. There's dragons flying around. Like, fuck, when do you say enough's enough?
Oh, the Underdark is so incredible in its own right. Like, I think like every time I've delved into the Underdark, it's just been a eye-opening experience.
We didn't get to delve into it, thank God, because that would have taken the quest in a whole another place.
Yeah, more time than you've got.
yeah, but stuff came up from down there.
I just want to quickly take a second to answer Inflatable Cat's question. Been doing very well, Inflatable Cat, just working very hard and trying to get some more time for D&D and hopefully play some more games, but otherwise doing great. So appreciate you asking.
Awesome. Well, look, Robin, it has been a blast. I'm happy if we wrap that up there. A nice 1 hour session.
No, that sounds amazing. It's been lovely to chat.
I feel great getting a lot of that kind of concerns off my chest, out of my head, and kind of like workshop some of those things with you.
And if you do want to off-stream workshop that, like how to actually bring that together and how to tie that story together, I'm more than happy to do that.
Oh,
too.
mate, I'm constantly jotting down little ideas I have, like in my little notes thing. But then I come back to it 2 weeks later. I'm like, what? How does this make sense? How do I fit this together? So yeah, maybe I'll add you to a channel and we can just like, here's the situation. How do I resolve this?
Especially while I'm not playing in the campaign, it's a really easy way for me to contribute.
Yes, and that's exactly what I need. Some other brain to like say, no, that's not going to make sense, or what about this? That'd be awesome. And there could feel more Dungeon Mastery sessions grounded in this particular campaign behind the screen.
That'd be great.
Awesome. Well, it has been fantastic chatting with you, Robin. Thanks so much for sticking with us, everyone. If you missed anything, VOD will be available right after we finish up on Twitch right here, and available on YouTube next week. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like this channel, like us on YouTube, like us in all the different places, follow, subscribe. We love it. We loved seeing that people enjoy our content, because we're just two guys having a chat or rolling some dice. And we'd love to see how it pans out for you all. We also have a Patreon available where we do post things like one-shots and insights into our different campaigns and streams. And don't forget to check out our podcast, which is now available on Spotify and pretty much everywhere you can find a podcast, I hope, if everything's working well. So that's it. That's it from us. Take care, and we'll see you again next week back in Icewind Dale for Rime and the Frostmaiden. Thanks, Robin. It's been a blast. Guys.